Hey everybody, good afternoon. Welcome to DisruptCRE Dallas. This is very exciting for me personally because I've been at a few of these events. I was just with this crew in LA last week, but to actually have it here in Dallas is phenomenal. As you know, CBRE has a very strong presence in Dallas, both with our local business, but it is also where a lot of our global activities take place, including our global technology group, technology and IT group, and our global innovation team, CBRE Labs, which I lead, and some of the members of our team are around here. So it's great to have it here. I mean, for not least because, frankly, the weather is just fantastic today, and it's nice not to be anywhere else. But I'm going to take us a little farther afield than some of the things that we're going to be talking about the rest of the day. Today I want to start talking about some of what I see as a few of the major macro trends that are impacting real estate and set to impact real estate in the future. So, this is one of my favorite quotes. It's from Peter Drucker, the great management thinker. And he said, "The greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence itself, it's to act with yesterday's logic." And if you measure turbulence by technological change, we are, without a doubt, in the most turbulent time in history, and certainly the most turbulent time for business in history. Why is this? Well, what you're going to see behind me here is a graph showing the difference between an exponential curve and a linear curve. Now, an exponential curve is what is driving a lot of the fundamental technologies that are operating today. It's famously coined by Ray Kurzweil in his law of accelerating returns. You may also know one iteration of it, which is Moore's law, the famous prediction by Gordon Moore that the speed of a chip will double and the cost of a chip will be halved every 2 years. And an exponential thing is something that builds on itself. A linear trend is one where with each step you just go a little further. So to demonstrate the power of this difference, if you take one step and then 2 steps and then 3 steps, that's a linear trend. After 30 steps, you've taken, once you've gone up 30 times, you're now taking 30 steps. If you follow that same trend, so if you take 1 step, then 2 steps, then 4 steps, then 8 steps, etc., by the time you get to 30 iterations, you've now traveled 28 times around the world. So these curves get very big very, very quickly. A lot of the IT technologies that are driving change in our society and in our lives are exponential, but real estate is in many ways linear. When we add, when you add new rooms to a new floor to a building, it's another floor, it's a step function. And so one of the things I think we as a real estate industry need to think about very carefully is how we manage our linear business in an exponential world. So let's talk about 3 trends, one of which is here, one of which is emerging as we speak, and one of which I think is going to make a huge impact on us in the fairly near future. The first is radical mobility. And I mean radical not in the sense of, like a surfer film, dude, that's radical, but radical in the sense of it's gotten down to the very root of the way in which we live. 2, we're going to talk about the collaborative economy, which is an emerging and very, very important trend. I think it may have begun with video stores and is now accelerated into just about everything else. And finally, we're going to talk about the transportation revolution of autonomous transportation that is just beginning to emerge and I think will have an enormous impact on our lives, and there, because it has an enormous impact on our lives, will have an enormous impact on our built environment and how we use it. So, radical mobility. This was the one that is probably the most obvious. We talk about it all the time, but nonetheless, it is so important that it bears consideration. And we now can do almost anything with almost anybody from almost anywhere, access any piece of information all of the time, have it embedded in any of our devices, the Internet of Things, all of this stuff. The fact that the world has become digitized, mobile, and highly connected is radical. And one of the ways to think about how this impacts real estate is by looking at what I'll call the deep history of real estate. So, from time immemorial, we have organized our built environments around our access to the means of production. So if you go back to the beginning of time, we were hunter-gatherers, we built yurts and teepees and various other mobile structures that allowed us to follow the means of production, that is our hunting and gathering patterns, and we organized our society around that. We fast forward to the agricultural age, and all of a sudden we're building farming towns, trading towns, et cetera, that allow us to be close to our farms and trade those goods back and forth. We moved into the industrial age. We need to be on supply lines for industrial products. We build the big industrial cities, which now are disparagingly somewhat called the Rust Belt, but they were next to what was very important for industry, right? Access to raw materials and the ability to move heavy materials back and forth very easily. We moved to the knowledge economy, and we have access to the most important tools of the knowledge economy, which is knowledge and people. So access to fax machines, printers, copiers, file cabinets, and our coworkers. And then, of course, we get to today, and with the mobile device, we now have access to all of that anywhere. Now, the reason that I think this is important is because every single time that we have made a substantial change in the way that we organize our business and what our means of production is, there has been a substantial change in the way that we organize our cities and which cities become relevant and which pieces of property are valued. But what does this radical mobility mean for us now? So these are a bunch of the pictures of places that I actually put this presentation together. I did not include, it includes most of the rooms in my house except for one that I didn't think it was appropriate to post here. But we can work anywhere. And I think one of the really interesting things to think about is because we can do anything anywhere, space has become fungible. It used to be that most space was built for a very specific asset class and was very hard to convert from one to the other. But yet here we are in this space, unbuilt, unimproved. We all have complete access to all of the tools of our trade. We are as functional here as we are in our very own offices. And so spaces become more interoperable. And we're beginning to see some of the impacts of that already. Think of Airbnb and the fact that two real estate asset classes just got merged. Hospitality and multifamily literally just got merged. And that's something that could not have happened if people weren't mobile and they didn't have with them everything that they needed to take. So this fungibility of asset classes, I think, is a real trend to watch, and one that we're seeing already in our business. Okay, so the collaborative economy, this is trend number 2. So what is a working definition of it? This is one from Rachel Botsman, a great thinker on the collaborative economy. But basically, it is moving from an ownership economy to an access economy. An ownership economy to an access economy. That means that we no longer value having something, we value being able to do something or being able to enjoy an experience. And already this is the most heavily invested tech sector in history. So over the last, I think it's 3 years, the top VCs have invested over $28 billion in collaborative economy companies, in pure play collaborative economy companies. Those companies, as of right now, are valued at over $125 billion. Fastest growing tech sector in history. And some of the names are familiar. There's Airbnb, there's Uber, there's Lyft. All of these are collaborative economy companies. So let's take one way to look at what a collaborative economy is. And the famous example is this. Almost every single family home in America has a power drill. That power drill is used about 10 minutes a year. That is not a very efficient way to deploy capital. But once people say, I don't need a drill, I need a hole in the wall, and I would need it exactly when I need it, when I want it, I need it to be available to me quickly, I need it precisely placed, I may need it bundled with services, I may want it to come with my painting, all of a sudden, you can see that it's a reinterpretation of the same value proposition. So I don't need a drill, I want a hole in the wall. And there have been companies that are making fortunes by reframing markets in this same way. So Netflix said, I don't need my DVDs, I want to watch a movie. Spotify, I don't want CDs, I want to listen to my music. You have Amazon Web Services that said, I don't need an infrastructure, I need a place to host my business. All of these companies are the foundations of the sharing economy and are driven mostly by 2 factors. One, it's easier and faster, and 2, it is a much more cost-effective way to run a business. Now, in the real estate space, we have a lot. Well, let me just jump back for a second. One of the things that is driving the collaborative economy, why is this happening now? I think that there's a bunch of factors. One, we are increasingly in an urbanized world, and in urban worlds we are close and it's easier to share. 2, we have begun as a society, and particularly with the millennials, we've begun to value efficiency more than we used to. People don't value owning as much, they value being good stewards of resources, and this is a better way to steward resources. And 3rd, we finally have the technology to be able to transact, move these things around, and deliver services in a very seamless way that we didn't before. That radical mobility is what's enabled the collaborative economy. In the real estate space, we have all sorts of companies that are doing this. I'm not sure if we have any here today, but you have Flexi that says, I don't need a warehouse, I need a pallet of storage, and I'm gonna go buy the pallet unit. We have, obviously, Airbnb. I don't need a hotel room, I need a place to stay. We have WeWork. I don't need to lease an office, I need a place to work that comes with a whole bunch of services. And on and on and on it goes. So we're seeing the collaborative economy impact virtually every single sector of real estate, both directly, as in these cases, and indirectly because these companies are changing the way that we utilize space. It's interesting, I was on I led a panel a couple weeks ago at CB's national conference in Denver with the CEOs of several different major real estate companies. And one of them who has 60,000 residential units, said that they are seeing a notable decline in the amount of space that people want in their apartments. People want less square footage. And they attributed an enormous amount of that to the fact that the millennials moving in, and even the boomers who are selling their homes and moving in, are getting rid of their books. They're getting rid of their CDs. They're getting rid of their DVDs, and that's just freeing up a ton more space. People just don't need as much space. Some of them don't even have TVs because they're just watching on their iPads and their computers. So the collaborative economy is impacting us in a whole bunch of interesting ways, and I think will continue to. Now let's jump into the future for a little bit and talk about autonomous vehicles. And every time that I talk about this, it gets a little less in the future and a little more in the now, which is really exciting. When I talk about this, people always say, well, you got to be out of your mind. Is this really something that we need to be thinking about? My answer is yes. What we're going to talk about today, it may seem like it's coming fast, but in fact, the roots of this have been laid for a long time. You may not realize this, but if you drive a semi-luxury car today, that is the most complicated machine most of us will ever interact with in our lives. It has over 100 million lines of code. That's more than the space shuttle. It's more than Facebook. It's more than Microsoft Windows. It's like 10 times that of an F-22 Raptor. So cars are already some of the most advanced machines in the world, and they're about to get there. Now, people have been thinking about this for a while. Whoa, that's not good. That's just that's a boring magazine ad. That's what that is. Let's see, our picture's going to show up. Okay, well, here we go. The first one was from 1958, where they were already envisioning autonomous vehicles. So this is something that people have been thinking about for a long time. We have the love bug up here because it's always good to have the love bug in a presentation. I just think it makes everybody happier. David Hasselhoff makes everybody happier. Hoff. Okay, so we've got David Hasselhoff. People are Knight Rider, right? That's an autonomous vehicle. Your car can almost be today. We fast forward to maybe the most prescient sci-fi movie ever made, Minority Report. Yet again, macho men jump on top of autonomous vehicles. I don't know whether we're going to actually, 10 years from now when autonomous vehicles are everywhere, we're just going to see people surfing them. Seems unlikely, but these movies seem to think so. And then we get to just about 3 weeks ago. That's Elon Musk in the center there. That's Tesla. One of the coolest things I've ever heard of. They pushed a software update to 120,000 cars over 5 days, and all of a sudden, 120,000 already sold Teslas were basically autonomous on the highways. This happened. It's happening now. Now, you may have seen some of the YouTube videos of people driving with their hands in the air down the road. Probably not a good idea. But the fact of the matter is that for highway driving, Tesla cars are now basically autonomous. And while they are trying to downplay the fact that this isn't, say this is just assisted driving, they're basically autonomous, and they're doing a really good job of it. So autonomous vehicles are more or less here. Many of the features in your cars are already the foundations of autonomous vehicles, right? Adaptive cruise control, the little beeping sound it makes when you back up, the camera that gives you front and forward views, all of those things are pieces that will go into autonomous vehicles. They're already here. And Tesla is far from the only company pursuing it. We all know about Google. Google's cars have now driven 1.3 million miles and have had 3 accidents. 3 accidents, all of them with the driver, although evidently they got a ticket a couple days ago for going too slow. You'll also see down there the Apple car. We got into Apple's headquarters and stole the prototype, and that's what it looks like down in the lower right corner there. You have Audi and Mercedes and Volvo and Ford and every major automaker in the world is doing this. 7 of the biggest automakers have all vowed to have autonomous vehicles on the road by 2020. Elon Musk says he's going to have fully autonomous vehicles on the road by 2018. So this is coming, and it's coming very soon. Now, what's driving the autonomous vehicles? Well, the first thing, and this is why I think that adoption of this is going to be so fast, is safety. Currently in the US, there are 15, just in the US, by the way, one of the safest places in the world to drive, 15 million auto accidents a year, 2.4 million injuries a year, 38,000 fatalities a year from cars. And 93% of all of those are human error. So there is an incredible safety benefit to adopting autonomous vehicles, and I think it will be very hard for people once people get their heads around this fact, it will be very hard for people not to adopt it, and we will look back one day and say, oh my God, we gave 16-year-old boys and girls access to a 5,000-pound machine that could go 100 miles an hour. Are we nuts? It's just clearly not a good idea, and now we have a solution to that. So I think that that's a lot of what's going to drive it. Not only will it be for people, but it will also be for things. What you see in the upper right-hand corner there are the Kiva robots. 15,000 of those are already deployed at Amazon's warehouses. My guess is over the next couple of weeks, we're hearing that they've deployed tens of thousands more for the upcoming holiday season. Those autonomous robots move stuff around their warehouses today. You also see trucks. About 4 months ago, the very first licensed semi-truck drove in Nevada. It was a Mercedes truck that drove across the Hoover Dam. Think about, so there's 3.2 million people in the transportation industry, huge impact on that market, because guess what autonomous trucks don't need to do? They don't need to sleep. They don't need to eat. They don't need to go to the bathroom. They don't fall asleep on the road. They don't take little white pills. None of those things. It's a much, much, much more efficient and much safer way to move stuff around the world. And then, of course, the drones. We all laughed a couple years ago when Amazon came out with their autonomous drones, but now both Google and Walmart are testing very significant drone delivery programs. I think that you could see very soon a world in which a lot of last mile delivery, the increasing volume of last mile delivery that we have in our highly Amazon Prime society, where a lot of that is delivered by autonomous drones, simply because people won't be able to fly them, but autonomous drones should be able to do it. So all of these things are going to be impacting our environment. But here's one of the most interesting things of all. Once you have autonomous vehicles, you can imagine an experience where you just get in the car, you ride to wherever you want to go, you get out, and then you say goodbye to the car. We don't carry that much stuff anymore. Most of us don't carry big briefcases full of papers. We don't have our CDs in the trunk. All of it's carried. That radical mobility and the shared economy allows us to be more free. And so then you can imagine people using transportation as a service. Now, I know that people say, well, people love their cars. Trust me, people loved their horses too 100 years ago, and you don't see a lot of those running around downtown Dallas. But transportation as a service, there's already been studies done that suggest you could see up to a 90% reduction in the number of vehicles on our roads because people will be sharing them. And by the way, if you think, just one more thing, if you think that people won't adopt this, remember that in New York, the wealthiest city in the world, almost everybody uses essentially a shared transportation service. And how many billionaires do you know who drive themselves? Not very many. So I think you're going to see a massive reduction in the amount of cars, a total reconfiguring of the way in which we use infrastructure, and that leads to some very interesting things. One, we have a lot of parking. We have a lot of roads. We have a lot of places for cars, up to 2 billion parking spots in this country that we're not going to need, and that presents some enormously interesting opportunities for adaptive reuse. Second of all, it can allow our streetscapes to finally be unchained from the automobile, and we can create really interesting walking and mobile environments that could be really different. No longer broken up by that big empty parking lot you have to walk past here in Dallas when it's like 100 degrees and you got to walk through the parking lot and there's not any shade. Gone, over and done with. So some incredibly interesting things on the horizon that I think will have enormous impacts on real estate. So just to summarize, with some strange colors which have just popped up there, maybe that's where my magazine ad went. Radical mobility creates interoperable space. It breaks down the barriers between asset classes. The collaborative economy allows us to consume that space and many other things as a service. And once you do that, we then add autonomous vehicles, which, by the way, could be a competing asset class because you spend time in a vehicle. You could actually say, I'm going to have a meeting in my car and just use it as a conference room. You're always connected. The amount of friction involved in going from one place to another goes down. That experience becomes much more pleasant, and you can move from place to place. Hard to imagine all of the different ramifications this will have on our society, but one similar analog, at least to think about, is to look at the internet. Another place that got, where everything became digitized and therefore computing power became fungible. Another place where people began to consume resources as a service. And where the switching cost, the time to go from place to place, the frictional cost became very low. You could imagine someday real estate consumption in many ways existing in the cloud as a network service that's delivered to us in an always-on environment. Of course, I could be totally wrong. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan, Marielle, to somebody. And I thank you all for your time. I'll also be on a panel later today. If you have any questions, please come and find me. Thank you so much.